The Balmoth brothers. A charmed life did the Balmoth family have. Keith and Michelle Balmoth had been married for many years now, marrying when both were young. They had spent the past 20 years growing their small farm in the valleys of Hopbyshire and caring for the only child they had been blessed with. Richard Balmoth was his name. He was 12 years old in the year 585, with thick brown hair and a charming demeanour like his mother, whereas from his father he'd taken little other than a strong work ethic, something that was more forced upon him than found willingly. As soon as he was able, his father had put him to work, mucking out the stables, towing the fields, milking the cows. There was no task his father wouldn't send his son to do, saying to Michelle when she complained about the lad's workload, "Work's good for the boy, didn't do me no harm, nor will it he." One of these such tasks is what saw young Richard walking back to his family's farm after a day of berry picking. Feeling very proud of the hoard of berries he picked and looking forward to the praise his mother would shower him in for doing so well, caused him to skip as he made his way home. Returning, he found the gates open. "Strange," he thought to himself. "Father never leaves the gate open." Going on, nothing else seemed amiss. The cows were still in the field as they had been when he left, as was the rest, save for the stable where a pair of horses had been. Now it was empty. "Mother, are you here?" Richard yelled, going into the farmhouse. But like the stables, this was deserted also. He left his berry basket on the dinner table and went on to search the barn and all the fields around the farm. He even ran back to the stables, hoping the horses may have just reappeared somehow. Eventually, as the sun set, he began to worry. His parents had never left him alone before, and he saw no reason why they would now. But young Richard was no fool and could care for himself rather well. So, for a week, which in Alidor is 8 days, he fared quite well, carrying on much as he would have if his parents were there. Not wanting his father to suddenly return and find he hadn't done his chores, but on the night of the 8th day he had no patience left. "They must be in echoes," he said to himself. The village was about 30 miles from their farm and was where the family would go to sell the farm's wares. "There's nothing more to do about it. I'll have to go find them. If I wait much longer, I will end up mad, talking to the cows more than I already am." With his decision made, he packed a bag with 2 loaves of bread, a few handfuls of berries and a flask of water, more than enough to get him there, he imagined. However, he had only ever travelled there before his parents on horseback. He didn't think about the fact he'd be walking and in reality would need double that to make it even halfway. After finding out his boots and laying out his regular walking clothes, a green shirt with grey trousers and vest, he took himself to bed. He slept well that night, sure he had come up with a fine plan. When morning came, he let the cows loose into the countryside, not wanting to leave them locked up while he was gone, knowing rightly they would not stray far. He found a sturdy stick to use as a walking cane and made his way to the gate. Bag on his back and cane in hand, he walked on to find the road and began his journey. One that he hoped would be short and end with the finding of his kin. However, what now lay before young Richard Balmoth was a journey that would not only affect his life, but many others. With those first steps from the Balmoth farm, Richard felt uneasy. A cold wind cast over him, pushing him on, stinging his ears as it went. "Here we go then. They cannot be far, and I shall find them soon. So begone, these nasty winds. I am on my way." The cold wind soon calmed, and the risen sun warmed the green lands around Richard, making him quite jolly. After finding the road to Echoes, he'd found himself feeling peckish, so had already gotten through half a loaf of bread and some of the berries as he made his way down the gravel path. He'd gotten almost 3 miles before he felt a thirst come to him. Taking his bag from his back and reaching in, he found his bag was soaked, along with what was left of his food. Unbeknownst to him, the flask he had taken had a crack in it and had been slowly leaking into his bag. Richard took out the flask and drank what little was left. "Damn, I will not get far without water," he thought, as he cleaned out his bag. He wondered if he should head back or carry on, but then he remembered a few miles ahead was a stream that ran out of a large wood, and followed the path for half a mile or so. With this memory in mind, he endeavoured to carry on, thinking he'd be able to carry enough in his broken flask to get the rest of the way. Going on with a lighter load did at least take the weight from his back, but now gone it was a constant reminder that he had no food or water left, making whatever jolly feelings he had previously vanish. Trudging on, he began to realise just how far Echoes truly was. It wasn't until the sun had almost set did Richard come to the stream. Once finally there, he fell to his knees. So desperate for a drink, he just began scooping handfuls of water into his mouth, aiming to drink his fill, but as he drank his stomach began to gargle. Looking over the stream, he realised there was a strange dark water running down it, tainting the water as it went. His eyes followed it until Richard saw the source. A few feet away, bodies floated in the stream. Their blood now washed down and mixed with the water as what was left in the corpses flowed out. The gargling in Richard's stomach grew worse as he realised what he'd been drinking. His aching belly, however, was not his biggest problem now. Ahead of him, behind the carriage and slain steeds the bodies had been taken from, their attackers rummaged through the belongings for anything of worth. "This ain't no good," Richard heard one say in a scratchy voice. "Shut it, you! Just get them bags open," another said, whose voice sounded much like the first. "I told you, just like the last pair we found, nothing but junk. Ain't these elves meant to be wealthy?" As they argued, Richard's belly groans grew louder, drawing the attention of the others. He slipped down the bank. Quietly he crawled into the water and clung to the bank as one of his attackers moved around the carriage and wandered off down the road. Terrified, Richard pulled himself as tight to the side of the bank as he could. All but the top of his head was submerged beneath the tainted water. "What you doing, Shoulder?" the one with the scratchy voice shouted over to the one walking towards Richard's hiding spot. "I heard something, so I did," Shoulder said. Then Richard heard footsteps. They sounded so close that he expected his head to soon be stood on. Thankfully, before boots landed on Richard's head, the footsteps stopped. Opening his eyes, which had up until now been squeezed tightly closed, he saw, reflected in the water, the face of one of the attackers. It showed a person barely 2 foot tall, wearing black Wellington boots, green trousers, a blue jacket, and a long pointed red hat. It was a gnome. Known to be vicious little so-and-sos for their small size didn't match the fear they could bring. They saw their horrific acts as mischievous and entertaining, finding nothing more amusing than mugging someone and leaving them for dead with a knife in their gut. Although they were extremely stupid and had rarely been seen after old farmer Penitus discovered you can ward them off just by placing a painted gnome on your doorstep or about your garden. They roam in gangs, you see, and are so foolish and scared of fighting amongst their own they would soon scurry away at the sight of another unknown gnome. "I'm sure I heard something here," Shoulder mumbled, placing the bloodied shovel he wielded over his shoulder. "Get back here, you! This barrow ain't gonna fill itself!" Another shouted to Shoulder. "I know you's out there, I smell ya, I do," Shoulder said, kneeling to the bank, tapping his nose. "He can't really smell me, can he? Could I really smell that bad? Oh, damn! I knew I should have voiced properly before leaving," Richard thought to himself. But to Richard's relief, Shoulder was stopped before he could lean over the bank any further. "Stop your slacking, you! It was your tip that led us to this waste of time as it is," the one with the scratchy voice said, as he ran over and tried to knock the hat from Shoulder's head. He dressed much like the other, except his trousers were yellow, his shirt was dark green, and his long pointed hat was orange. "There's something out here, I smell him. There's elf about, Smucks. I tell you there is," Shoulder argued. "Course there is. It's their land now. There stinks about all over the place. But you're just smelling them, ain't you? Just their blood dripping in the pond is what you smell," Smuck said. "Maybe," Shoulder concurred, eyes still fixed to the water. "Come on, let's get back to the others and tell 'em what fun we've had." Smucks giggled. Finally, the pair began walking away. This is my chance, Richard thought. He couldn't go back on the path now, and the only other way was through the woods that lay opposite the stream. However, of all the places that were on the road to Echoes, these woods were the only place his mother had told him never to go. At the time, though, he didn't think she expected there to be a gang of gnomes on the road. Silently, he pushed himself from the bank and let himself drift over the stream. Once over, he looked back to the carriage. He now saw there were 4 gnomes, and by the bank 3 bodies lay. Elves, but no one he knew, thankfully. As he clambered out of the stream, he prayed his parents hadn't been intercepted by these fiends on their way to wherever they had been going. Suddenly, a hand grabbed him, throwing him back down into the stream. I told you, didn't I? I said elves were about, Shoulder cried. In fact, there were 5 gnomes in total. Richard had mistook Shoulder for one in the same coloured outfit. The others came running and Richard was pulled from the water and thrown into mud. Oh, not an elf? A woody, that's what this is, Shoulder said, lifting Richard up by his ear. Shoulder went to yell whatever foul words he had planned, but before he was able, Richard's stomach spoke first. With a gut-wrenching groan, the tainted water forced its way back up and spewed from Richard's mouth and over Shoulder. So terribly embarrassed Richard was that even to this fiend he found himself apologising as he ran into the woods. I'm so awfully sorry, Richard shouted back, covering his mouth trying to not let more come up. Richard kept running until the sounds of Shoulder chasing him faded, which was a lot longer than Richard had hoped. Vomiting on the gnome may have saved his life, but it had enraged Shoulder. By the time he could finally rest, it was deep into the night, and Richard was completely lost with no food, water or anything to keep him warm. His clothes were still soaked as he fell before a tree, shivering. The cold night's air made him feel as if his wet clothes were gluing themselves to him, making the cold far worse. He had survived the gnomes, but you could not just throw up on the cold and run away from it. Running may have helped warm him, but he had no energy for that or for much else as he sat there shaking. His eyes slowly closed and his breathing became weak. His heart beat slower and slower, and by that tree Richard Balmoth would surely have found death, if not for a pair passing by on a quest of their own. What's this then? The wood elf who came by him said to the foal who walked beside him. He replied by walking to Richard and rubbing his nose over his head. He's near death. Best leave him be, the wood elf said, but the foal disagreed, neighing loudly to his companion. Fine, but you are carrying him, the wood elf complained as he helped pick Richard up and put him on the foal's back. The sun was just beginning to rise when Richard awoke. He found he was before a warm fire, wrapped in an even warmer blanket, but quickly realised he didn't have anything on beneath the blanket. Looking up, he saw his clothes hanging on a branch above the fire. You're finally awake. Here, eat, a voice said. He turned his head, rubbing his eyes as he did to see his saviours. Holding a wooden bowl with a nasty-looking grey paste in was a young wood elf boy who looked to be about the same age as him, wearing a long violet shirt and a belt around his waist, making the shirt seem like a dress on him, with shoes on his feet that looked like slippers. Behind was the foal, who had a white coat that seemed to shine out in the dark woods. He looked to Richard neighing and shaking his mane, quite pleased to see Richard awake. What happened? Where am I? Richard asked. The Tarrydale. We found you half dead. You are lucky horses so kind, the boy said. So it's him I have to thank for stripping me and drying my clothes? Richard asked. No, that was me, but he insisted we make you warm. Now eat before he whines more, he said, handing the bowl to Richard. What is this? It's Ellen beans, corn and a couple of other bits. It will settle your stomach. It's been making some awful sounds, the boy told him, as the foal nodded his head, neighing, trying to encourage Richard to eat up. Taking the spoon to his lips, he sheepishly tried it and was surprised to find it tasted rather good, despite looking foul. So, do my generous saviours have names? Richard asked, making the boy and foal look to one another. He is horse and I'm boy, the boy said. They're not your real names, though. What did your parents call you? Richard inquired. I don't know. I never knew them. I've always been with the horses, and they don't need names, Boy said. Wait, I don't understand. You were raised by horses? Richard asked. No, don't be silly. I just travelled with them for as long as I can remember. We were searching for the rest of our kin when we found you, Boy said. How did you lose them? Richard asked, making the foal rather upset. Do not be sad, we will find them soon, Boy said, patting the foal on the head. We wandered off, the pair of us, and when we got back they were gone. There was talk of them leaving these lands, but they will not have left us behind. We are both sure of it. Funny, my own quest sounds much alike yours. I returned home to find my parents gone also, but this name thing will bother me. There must be some other name than boy or horse for me to call you, Richard said, as he emptied the bowl. Then looking to the foal, he shouted, Caspian! Yes, that's a fine name for a fair horse such as you. This led the foal to nod wildly, feeling like such a name would suit him well. Good. Well, from here on I shall call you Caspian, the finest horse of the Hopbyshire. What about you? James is a nice name, or Peter, Benjamin, Eric. What will it... Suddenly, Richard stopped talking, as a noise came from the bottom of his body. Not his stomach this time. A little further down did the sound come. Jumping up as much as he was able whilst keeping the blanket around him, he dashed into the largest bush he could find. What was in that food? He yelled. I told you what was in it, and what it would do, Boy said. You said it would settle my stomach, not turn it inside out, Richard complained, clinging to the bush as his rear end erupted. Laughing at Richard as his cries came from behind the bush, Boy said, Jonah. I heard that name once. What are you on about now? Richard yelled back. This is never ending. It just keeps coming. I've never eaten this much. My name. I like Jonah, Boy said. Okay, fine. You're Jonah, Richard replied. Do I not get a grand announcement like Caspian did? Jonah teased. Really? Now? Richard argued. Yes, now, Jonah ordered. Fine. All hail Jonah of the Tarrydale, master of making insides fall asunder, Richard shouted, as his new friends Jonah and Caspian giggled to one another, both finding their new company very amusing. Once Richard was out of the bush and feeling himself once more in dry clothes, Jonah began putting out the fire and preparing the 2 sacks that hung over Caspian's back. Where is it you're going now? Jonah asked. I was heading to Echoes before running into those gnomes. Damn, you have had my mind so busy I forgot all about them, Richard said. We already knew of them, but they are no worry in these woods. Few dare enter here. I knew you must have been running for something when we found you. So while you slept, Caspian went back and found no trace of them or any others following you, Jonah told him. That was brave of him, Richard said, making Caspian shake his mane to agree. Do not encourage him. He is far too reckless as it is. If you wish, you may follow us. Echoes is on our path. We head to the eastern sea. There we hope to find Caspian's kin. That is where they would say their path to their new land would be, Jonah said. Then follow you I will, and hopefully we'll both find our families and be able to put all this behind us, Richard said. After helping pack what was left, they went on, going east deeper into the woods. The sun was risen, but it made little difference in the tightly woven trees of the Tarrydale. Little sunlight made it past the thick leaves. As they walked, even the hoot of an owl made Richard jump. He had never been in such a place, and now away from the fire, he found himself fearing the woods more so with each step. Desperate to take his mind from his surroundings, he quickened his pace to walk beside Jonah and ask, So, what is this land the horses are going to? I don't know. From what they say, it's a green land, much alike this one, but others don't dwell there. No dwarves, no elves, humans, or orcs. It is a land for the beasts, they say, a place where the wars of this land can't spread to. Jonah answered. So they will take you with them to this new land of theirs? Richard asked. I don't know. I hope so. This world has never shown me any love. If I am lucky, there is another that will, Jonas said. Suddenly, Caspian stopped. Then skipping back, he nudged the pair of them into the undergrowth until all three were hidden by it. For ahead was another group walking through the Tarrydale. They all sat there silently as the footsteps drew closer. Far too heavy they were to be that of gnomes, and far too light to be any of the beasts that dwell in the dark woods. Whilst they hid, a golden shine found them, and they saw who approached. 5 in all. 4 wore golden armour and helms, whilst the other was wrapped in a long white cloak with an eye embroidered over the back. Who is it? Richard asked. High elves, quiet! Jonah quietly snapped back. Richard had never seen a high elf before and couldn't help but take a peep. His curiosity, however, soon gave them away. With the twitch of a few leaves, the one in the centre rose his hand and said, Come out now, there is no need to hide. Drag them out, one of his human guards yelled. No, do no such thing, Master Jonathan, for they are just scared, so do not let them think we mean them harm, the one in the centre said. What do we do? Jonah wondered, but before he could think, Richard was out of the bracken and before the strangers with Caspian close behind, forcing him to follow. I am Richard Balmoth of the Balmoth farm in the Hopbyshire. Oh my, quite a sprightly young fellow you are, but you sadly are not the ones I seek. On the trail of gnomes we are, my guard and I. The vicious little buggers have been causing havoc, you see. My name is Alidor Tranham, he said, holding out his hand to shake Richard's. And who are these others I see, and what brings you here? This is no place for the young to play. This is Caspian and Jonah. We're all on a joint quest of sorts. You see, they have lost their family, as have I, Richard said, looking to the kindly face of the man made him want to open up and tell him all they'd been through. But Jonah's hand to his shoulder made him stop. Do not tell too much, for bad men hide well behind a kind face, Jonah said. You are right to be suspicious, young man, for coming across 4 lads as well-armed as these. I would think you foolish if you did not, but I swear we mean you no ill, Alidor said, as he noticed how unequipped they seemed to be. Both also looked quite hungry, for Jonah had never had a proper cooked meal, and Richard had not cooked much over the week he'd stayed at the farm alone, fearing he may end up burning down the house without his mother's assistance. Come, let us sit for some fine food and conversation. The gnomes will be no bother until night. No, we must keep going, Jonah insisted. Yes, and we have not the time to be feeding strays, Jonathan protested. Then you shall go on while we eat. I should be fine alone for a moment or two, Alidor replied. I already said no, Jonah argued. And I already ignored you, lad, for your mouth may say no, but the rumble from you and your company's bellies tells me different. Come sit with me. Once my guard are away, you'll find I'm just an old man with food to spare, Alidor insisted. To be honest, a good meal would not go amiss, Richard said, as Jonah stared to him as if he'd daggers in his eyes. Good. Then it is settled, Alidor announced, waving his guard on and leading them a little off the road to where 4 large oaks created a circle. Perfect. Oh, this is perfect. I have not had a picnic for what feels like an age. And what a fine spot to have it also. Alidor was so happy with his choice of picnic spot, he almost forgot about those who followed him there. Looking to the floor, Richard noticed roots over much of the ground that would make sitting there rather uncomfortable, until the young party got their first taste of the magic some in these lands can wield. "Come now, come on. Will you not help us with a place to sit and eat? Wake up, would you?" Avlor said, twirling his left hand as he did. "There we go. They're up now. You've all slept too long." Booming groans came about them. The trees shook, dropping old leaves onto them, as the roots on the ground began to move, sinking into the ground to create a perfectly flat circle. When the shaking and groaning finally ended, Avlor said, "Ah, yes, perfect. Much appreciated, that is, and we will not intrude for too long." "What was that? Magic?" Jonah asked, bewildered. "Well, not really. All trees have a voice, you see, but they sleep very heavy, and you must use the right cry to wake them. Providing you take whatever you bring and do not bend branches as you go, you'll find them rather friendly. This, however, is real magic," Avlor announced, reaching beneath his cloak and pulling out a red and white checkered blanket that he cast out and lay over the floor. Reaching in again, he pulled out plate after plate of food, cucumber sandwiches and potato and leek pasties to start, with biscuits and cakes to follow. He even produced a bag overflowing with apples for Caspian. He lay it all around the blanket and insisted they sit. All did as they were told and began to eat. Caspian munched away at apples as Richard tucked into a pasty, but Jonah still stared to the strange man. "Why are you being so kind to us?" he asked. "Is there a reason I should not be? You all seem nice enough, and I've been looking for the excuse to have a nice picnic for a while. Please eat," Avlor begged. Reluctantly Jonah did, and was soon stuffing himself like the rest, but his eyes rarely left Avlor's. "So, what was this about your lost families?" Avlor asked. "I returned home a week back and found my family's farm empty. My parents gone, just vanished to my eyes. The only place I could think they would go is Echoes. So I endeavoured to walk there and find out for myself. Sadly, I ran out of food and water on my walk and then bumped into those gnomes you're hunting, sir," Richard said as chocolate cake coated his lips. "Do not worry. The gnomes will not have the nerve to show themselves now my guard are here. Humans have a way of striking fear into fiends such as them," Avlor replied. "What of your friends here, then? For I have never seen a young man dressed as you do, young Jonah, nor have I seen a messeler horse with a coat so white before." "We found him half dead while searching for the rest of our herd. We were separated a while back now," Jonah said. "Let me see if I may aid your endeavours slightly," Avlor said, placing his hand to the soil and tightly closing his eyes. "What's he doing now?" Jonah asked Richard. "I think he's speaking to the woods." "Ah, yes, there we go. They say they heard many hooves passing through about a day and a half ago, travelling east. Are you sure east?" Avlor asked the soil. "Yes, they are adamant. They go east, but there is only the sea. Where is it your herd travel?" Avlor asked. "They travel to their new land, and if we're quick, we'll be able to catch up," Jonah said, jumping up with Caspian, both eager to get back to their kin. "What about my parents? Do the trees say anything about them?" Richard asked. "I'm afraid they do not, but that's not to say they didn't pass this way. The trees don't tend to notice small things like us, if we cause no harm to them, that is," Avlor said. Quite disappointed, Richard ate as much of the cake as he was able before helping Jonah put the remaining sandwiches and biscuits into Caspian's sacks, as Avlor insisted he couldn't eat it all. After Richard thanked him again, and Avlor had shook both their hands once more, he looked over them and said, "Now, at least you will have full bellies on the rest of your travels. Just a couple of things are you lacking now?" Reaching beneath his cloak again, he revealed 2 sheathed short swords. "They're not the best made, but should be more than enough to scare away any more gnomes," he said, handing one to Richard and one to Jonah. "I've never held a sword," Jonah said, pulling it from the sheath to reveal the finely sharpened blade. "Well, I do hope you will have no need for them, but they'll be handy to have," Avlar said. He watched them both tie the swords to their belts, then he took the picnic blanket from the ground and cast it out once again. However, this time, as it flew out, the red and white over it began to turn green. Pulling his arms apart, it split in 2. Letting go, they floated to the young boys, wrapping themselves around them. Bronze clasps appeared and clipped them together so that the capes hung down their backs. "You have been so kind to us. I'm sorry, we've nothing for you in return," Richard said as he admired his new cape. "There is nothing I need, so do not worry about that. To know I have made 3 friends this day is more than enough for me. Come now, we have eaten our fill, so I best be rejoining my guard and let you be on your way," Avlar said. As they left, the trees soon groaned again as they let their roots protrude from the ground, leaving their picnic spot tangled in roots again. Once back on their path, they parted, with Avlar waving to them as he hurried on, for Jonah and Caspian now knew they were on their kin's trail. After leaving Avlar behind, the group's pace increased, even more so when Caspian saw tracks in the mud. "These are horse tracks, that's for sure, Caspian. We can't be far now," Jonah said. Emerging from the tarrydale, they looked east, and there around green mounds stood their herd. Great white steeds covered the slopes, most looking east, out to the sea. All such eyes would soon be drawn to the tarrydale as a joyous neigh ran out to them from Caspian. "See, Caspian, I told you they would wait for us," Jonah said, as 2 great white horses charged to them. Jonah and Caspian ran also until all embraced as only a parted family would, leaving Richard to just look on, wondering if he would be as lucky as his friends. To the northeast he could see echoes. He was getting closer to the end of his quest with each step, but now only worried about what he may find there. What if his parents weren't there? What if he wasn't as lucky as the strange couple who had befriended him? These thoughts were soon shaken from him, though, as a cry came from his back. Turning, he saw Jonathan stumbling to him, wailing in pain as he forced himself on. For the tough, battle-hardened guard who had fought orcs and even fouler beasts had been outwitted by gnomes. "You there, boy, aid me," he begged as he collapsed before Richard. He had one of the gnome's pickaxes lodged in his back and had already lost too much blood to last much longer. Even with aid, he would soon die. Jonah and Caspian rushed back over as Jonathan spoke his last. "They have him, the seer. You must get him back. If they learn his secrets, they could kill the ground beneath our very feet. Please, I beg you, find Seer Tranum." With those last words, his hand that had been gripping Richard's cape fell away. Neighing rang out from the horses. They were done waiting, and the sight of a dead soldier of the crowned city only spurred them on more. "This is it. They're not waiting any longer," Jonah shouted, as sunlight cast over the mounds and the shine of the steeds' coats increased. Dancing white lights turned to gold, and as it danced, the herd changed. Glowing white wings grew upon their backs, their manes and tails thickened and began to sparkle. They can fly," Richard said, mouth agape at the sight. No regular messeler horses were these, for these were the steeds of the gods, steeds of the first, gifted to Norse's chosen to carry the high elves over her world. But with the birth of the human race, many had forgotten about them. No need did they have for their friendship, once they believed they had the greatest army of the lands. So fickle high elves were, that they soon replaced the old. Caspian's kin ran towards the light to change with the rest as Jonah climbed upon Caspian's back. "Come with us," he said. "You owe that Avlar nothing." You know how it feels to be abandoned, Jonah. I want to come. Believe me, I do. Just leave and find a land that's better than this. I just don't feel I can. There's something here worth staying for. Something we haven't found yet. Even if we don't owe that old man, I will not have him feeling abandoned at the hands of Shoulder and his fiends, Richard announced. This is goodbye, then, Jonah said, as Caspian neighed. Richard heard more roars come from the horses as they began to take off, flying off over the sea to find their new home. Goodbye, Richard, and thank you for naming us, Jonah said, handing him one of the sacks of food as Caspian reluctantly turned to join his parents, and Richard turned back to the Tarrydale, and they went their separate ways. A high elf went for a walk in the woods that day, unaware that he would be prey. This one should have stayed away and not gone walking in the woods that day. For the trees may like him, but those who dwell here don't. Those there wish to make him into a well-fitting coat, to pluck his eyes and pull his skin. To folk who dwell here great joy will it bring. So, when I return to the world beneath the land, I shall carry him in my hand. But a bundle of skin and bones, polished and grand, will be left of the one who dared walk these lands. You know, if you had put a little more work in, you could have had been a great wordsmith instead of the tiresome scoundrel you seem to be, Avlar said. He was tied around a rock with each arm pulled tight around it. Both his hands had been broken, but one middle finger did Shoulder have left to snap. He's right, Shoulder. We should get this done and head back. I don't like these woods, Smuck said. Quiet you. I ain't been able to play with a fancy elf like this before. No, I ain't gonna rush this. Take my time with this one, I will, Shoulder said, as he took his trowel and used it to slowly bend Avlar's last unbroken finger back. The bone snapped, making all the gnomes save for Smucks giggle and jeer, very much enjoying the ghastly show being performed before them. But to their displeasure, Avlar barely let out a sound. Most of his strength to scream or even cry had left him. Jonathan and the rest of Avlar's guard had come across the gnomes' camp. To their shock, they'd found it a couple of miles west of the stream within the Tarrydale. Their camp was in a patch of dead oaks that had stopped the trees noticing their presence. Before Avlar's guard could even form a plan, they were set on. Of the 12 gnomes who dwelled there, only 3 had been slain in the skirmish. 2 of Avlar's guard fell before even drawing their swords. Edmund Wicker of the Crown City killed 2 before a shovel stabbed into his knees, making him fall and leaving Shoulder free to plunge his trowel into his eye. Jonathan embedded his sword into one as he ran until a pickaxe found his back. He desperately tried to pull himself up as he wailed in pain, wondering why the gnomes hadn't killed him as he continued to cry out. What he didn't know was Shoulder was well aware others travelled with him and had left Jonathan alive, hoping his wailing would draw out the rest. To Shoulder's luck, it did. They followed the dying man until his master found him. But before Avlar could aid him in any way, they pounced. Fishing hooks were cast, 6 in all, with most finding their targets, aimed for Avlar's hands they had been. Though Shoulder and the others knew little of magic, they knew through much practice that this was the best way to disarm a lone enemy. Without the use of his hands, Avlar could do little other than curse the group as they dug the hooks deeper into his hands and arms and then proceeded to drag him back to their camp. Now, with his last finger broken, blood pooling all around him and the 4 rhymes of the gnome ringing in his ears, Avlar felt himself beginning to fade away. Until a voice found him and all the gnomes in the camp. Has he thrown up on you yet, Shoulder, or is it just wood elves your foul face has that effect on? Richard's voice made all the gnomes jump to their feet, grabbing shovels and forks as they did. "Where ya hiding? Come out here so I can break ya," Shoulder ordered. His eyes darted around the trees searching for a foe they couldn't find, until a rock found the head of one of Shoulder's gang. "I'm right here, Shoulder," Richard yelled, waving to the fuming gnomes before turning to run. "Get after him," Shoulder bellowed. "Get him alive. I'll gut him myself, I will." "Wait, the loot, the other one. We've got enough, Shoulder," Smux argued. But Shoulder, nor any of the gang other than the one with the rock embedded in his head, remained. All hurried off after Richard, while Smux ran at the back, still yelling to Shoulder as he went. "Spread out! Find the runt! He's not slipping off this time, he ain't!" Shoulder spat as he charged after Richard. He and his gang were all eager to find the runt, save for Smux. Carrying on, they pushed their way through bracken until the gnome at the front let out a wail and tried to run back. The others caught him and he began to yell. "Others are here! We need to go! Others here! We need to go! We need to go!" he begged. "Others? Others?" Shoulder roared. "There are no others! We killed them all! Now, get through there or I'll gut all you gits!" Shoulder ordered, forcing his gang on through the bracken until they all saw what had scared the other. On the far side, another gang of gnomes stood, with grey bottoms, brown tops, green cloth around their heads, and extremely peculiar-looking faces. "This is someone else's turf!" one of Shoulder's party yelled. "Run! Leg it!" Another shouted. "Stop it! There's more of us! Stop and get back here!" Shoulder barked, but none listened as they ran back to their camp. All in such a mindless panic, one of their number was trampled in the scuffling. All ran but Shoulder, whose attention had gone back to the strange faces of the other gnomes. "They ain't no gnomes," he mumbled. Plucking up all the courage he had, he stormed forward towards the others and then stopped, once their faces became clear to him. For they weren't gnomes at all, but rocks, with bark lent on them and green cloth wrapped around them to look like a hat, and for eyes, 2 slices of cucumber had been stuck on each. "That runt! See, it's the runt!" he yelled, turning to get the others back, only to see Richard stood there, sword in hand. He had tried to sneak up on Shoulder as he inspected the fake gnomes he had made, but Shoulder had turned around just in time to catch him. Shoulder swung his shovel and knocked Richard's sword from his hand. "Trying to be sneaky, are you, runt?" he spat, as he swung his spade again, striking Richard's cheek. He fell to the floor, feeling his head spin as Shoulder pushed him onto his back. "See, I'm not as thick as they are, runt. I'm smarter than some wee woody, smarter than even one who dwells in a tower of gold. I'm so clever, I know just how to keep you alive as I take apart your bones." Shoulder beamed as he anticipated the fun he was about to have, pulling apart the young wood elf, but his joy would be short-lived. For Shoulder's shouting and boasting had drawn attention of others. With great haste, the pair had come, and with the waft of Jonah's cape, Shoulder's head was covered, and he was pulled away from Richard and pushed to the rear of Caspian. Rearing up, Caspian sent Shoulder flying until he crashed to the side of a tree, leaving him dead at the bottom with more broken bones than whole ones. "You came back," Richard said as Jonah pulled him up. "Me and Caspian both agreed that maybe you were right. Something here may be worth staying for," Jonah replied. "I'm glad to hear it, but we must now get back to Avalar. He was in an awful way when I left him. There's also a gang of gnomes to deal with still," Richard said. "You're right, but I shouldn't worry too much. We are not the only ones who stayed," Jonah told him. When the pair announced they wished to remain, Caspian's parents had followed with 3 others who had never wished to leave their lands behind, but orcs had forced them to. Now, though, the young foal had returned with allies, and they saw new bonds that could be formed. For if the High Elves had no more use for their kind, they would find others that did, and in the faces of the young woodfolk Caspian had befriended, they saw a need for steeds like them amongst their kind. Leaving Jonah and Caspian to find Richard, the young foal's parents, who Richard would eventually name Bella and Bruno, went on to find the gnomes' camp, but heard them before finding them. The gnomes made such awful sounds when they ran from Richard's fakes that keen ears could have found them from a mile away. Before even getting close to their camp, their hooves found them, running through their gang, leaving Smucks and the rest trampled into the dirt of Tarrydale. Hurrying back to the camp, they found Caspian's kin had beaten them there and gnawed through Avlar's binds. He now spoke to the horses as if they were old friends who had almost forgotten about one another. "No, no, dear friend. We would never not need the friendship of your kind." He stroked the nose of one with his broken hand as he spoke. "But yes, my people on the whole have, and I am sorry for that. If another land calls, then I understand why you would have wished to go, but here we already may have found a new," he said, turning to the three of them, before his legs shook and he fell. "Quick, we must get him to Echoes. There will hopefully be someone there who can help him," Richard said. They placed him on Bruno's back, with Richard on Caspian and Jonah on Bella. They were at Echoes before nightfall. Approaching the village, they found most there were as kind as Richard had remembered. A woman Richard had heard his mother call Miss Cobla on their last visit had quickly noticed the group when they arrived, and Avlar was soon taken to the village healer. His hands were bandaged, but they could do little to save them. The many vials of potions and herbs the healer forced past his lips did, however, bring the colour back to his face, and before long he would be feeling like himself once more. The boys didn't stay long enough to see this, though. Leaving the other horses to watch over him, Richard led Jonah and Caspian to a grocer's called Leafy Greens, sitting beside the dockside. The owner, Gregory Denson, had grown it into a fairly well-off business and was the best place to start the search for Richard's parents. Leaving Caspian to wait by the door, the pair went in to find no one else was in the grocery save for the owner. The shelves and crates scattered around the shop were mostly bare, and the produce that was there looked old and brown.
"What do you want?"
Gregory barked to them as they entered.
"I'm closed. Can you not read signs?"
"Oh, I'm sorry, sir. We did not notice you were closed, but we did not come to barter," Richard said, hoping to calm him enough to get some answers. "I am Richard Balmoth, sir. My parents are Keith and Michelle Balmoth. I've come searching for them, you see," Richard went on, until Gregory started yelling again.
"Balmoth? Another damn Balmoth? You shan't have bothered, boy. They're long gone now. Arrived about 7 days back to sell what they had. Once done, they boarded a boat to the south."
That can't be. They can't just have left me behind,"
Richard mumbled as tears built in his eyes.
"He's lying, Richard. He must be. Caspian's kin wouldn't leave us, nor would yours have," Jonah said.
"No such luck, boy. They're gone. Gone for good, and they cursed their useless son as they went. Glad to see the back of you was your dear mother, as will I be. Now be off with yourself," Gregory insisted.
"Come on, Richard. We shall ask others and find the truth of this," Jonah said.
What if he's right?"
Richard muttered, trying not to believe the things the grocer had told him. But before they could leave the grocery, a shadow covered them from the open door, and a vengeful voice followed.
"Enough trickery, for I am tired now. Though much of my magic is now lost to me, due to the torture my hands endured, I still have one great gift. A gift that lets me see the lies in your words, greengrocer."
Avlar stood like a king in the doorway. His voice shook the shop and left Gregory on his knees, cowering in fear. For he knew the robe he wore and no seer would fall for his lies, least of all Avlar Tranum. With one glance of the fearful elf, Avlar knew all he needed. For Richard's parents had not left. In fact, They now lay in the same grocery their son now stood. For years, Gregory had lusted after Michelle, just waiting for his moment to take what he had dreamed of time and time again. So, when the pair arrived to sell their farm's wares, as Richard had guessed they had, he took the chance he'd been waiting for. Striking Keith with a mallet and taking Michelle by the neck once their backs were turned to him. She kicked and fought, and before he was able to say any of the loving words he'd planned, he had throttled her. Their bodies now lay beneath Gregory's bed, wrapped in blankets, left to slowly rot.
"Go, both of you. I shall handle this and then speak with you,"
Avlor ordered, forcing the pair to leave as Gregory whimpered on the floor. Jonah looked to Avlor and saw his kind smile was gone. Only anger covered the old man's face now. Once reunited with Caspian, they found 3 soldiers of the Crown City waiting with him. They entered the grocer's after the pair left, and shortly after Gregory's begging and pleading stopped, leaving the 3 of them to sit in silence. Richard wept as Caspian lay before them, placing his head over Richard's lap, whilst Jonah's arms went around him.
What do I do now? I'm alone in a world that doesn't want me, Richard thought, making both his new friends look to him like they could read his mind. We leave here before Avlor comes back. We leave together and stay together, no matter what else finds us, because that's what families do, isn't it, brother? Jonah said, with a smile and knowing nod to one another, and the shake of Caspian's mane. The 3 brothers all agreed. The other steeds rejoined them, and they left Echoes together before Avlor could stop the newly formed family from leaving. Avlor found himself worrying more than he imagined he would when Richard left with his new family, but in truth, he had known what course of action they would choose, though that did not stop his worrying. After thanking Miss Cobbola and others, he had found a charming spot for Richard's parents to rest outside of Echoes. They were buried where the great steeds had taken flight. Sadly, unlike Richard's parents, they would never return to the lands they called home, but safe and free they now were, free to roam the yet-to-be-discovered lands of this globe, and find a plane that would be theirs and theirs alone. Avlor left Echoes, planning on travelling to the Balmoth farm, keen to end his worrying, but the work of seers is seldom that simple. One task after another kept him from visiting. Increasing his anxiety more so were rumours spreading around the Hopbyshire, rumours that only increased as the weeks went on regarding the new residents of the Balmoth farm. Some say they'd seen white horses running the farm, others whisper about giants guarding it. Some even believe a witch dwells there, casting terrible curses on whoever dares cross its boundaries. But as you know from this fable, only a few of these things are true, for nothing more than a family lived there now. That family is what Avlor found when he was finally free to visit. Little did any know that in the years to come, the names of the Balmoth brothers would be known by far more than any of our young friends could have dreamed.